Hello, this is Tori Henderson, and I'm here with Marlena Mahiran.
Hello, welcome.
Good. All right, it's like 11:04, and we're getting started with our webinar. So hopefully you are seeing a slideshow. Is that what you're seeing, Marlena?
I am seeing starting slideshow.
There we go. We're up. Can you see that too?
I can see that too.
All right, there's our smiling faces. So we're going to get started here. Thank you for joining us today. How to talk to today's kids about SES, put little hyphens in between so that Facebook would approve of us. I'm Tori Henderson.
And I'm Marlena Mahiran, and we're so glad that you've taken the time to join us today.
Absolutely. So before we get started, I just want to talk about getting the most out of this webinar.
That's right. So you're going to want to go ahead and close all of your programs on your computer. That way this webinar will stream as efficiently as possible. You also want to make sure you turn on the chat feature, which should be a blue box in your upper, this says left-hand corner. On mine, it was the right. So it may be the left or the right, but there should be a feature that says chat. So go ahead and turn that on. And then try to eliminate any distractions if you want to silence your cell phone, and really eliminate distractions so you can get the most out of the next hour, because we're going to cover some really great information.
Yeah, and it sounds like our Wi-Fi is a little wobbly, so if that's the case, we'll try and work with it, but hang in there with us and we'll see if it kind of straightens out. You are in the right place today. If you want to have an open relationship with your child, a role in helping them prepare for the teen years, but maybe you aren't sure exactly what to say. Maybe the topic of sex education makes you feel a little bit uneasy, but you are ready to feel confident and comfortable. You would like to kind of tackle that for your child. You want to do a good job talking about the tough stuff, then you are in the right place.
So before we really get going, I want you to think about whether or not you have had the talk with your child. So go ahead and just type in the chat box whether or not this is something that you have attempted to talk about with your son or daughter.
Yeah, it looks like some people are saying they have or they think so, but sometimes it's hard to tell, like if you did that count. So if you, whether you have or haven't, or you're just feeling a little uncertain, you are in the right place today. This webinar, you're gonna learn about where today's kids are getting their sex education, the top myths parents believe about sex education, and what kids gain when their parent is involved in the topic of sex education. We're going to talk about what to say at what ages and how to create a bond that lasts a lifetime.
Be sure you stay tuned though to the very end of the webinar, because we are going to present you with a special offer that you will only hear about if you wait until the very end, and we're excited to share it with you. So stay on until the end so you can hear about it.
So where did you get your sex education? So we want to hear a little bit from you. Did you learn it from your mom or dad? Did you learn it in school? Where do you feel like, was it friends or cousins? I'm seeing some comments here that this is a popular one, a neighbor. Sometimes grandparents, sometimes parents, brochures that were handed to you maybe or left in the bathroom. So a lot of us get it from a variety of sources, but a lot of parents that come to our webinars and take our classes, they maybe didn't get the role modeling that they want. So if our parents did a really good job, then we can kind of repeat what they did and it's easy. But if they didn't talk to us or they were very uncomfortable with the subject, then it can be really hard for us to know how to say it.
Maybe some of you learned about sex from some of the popular TV shows from your childhood. I know I spent a lot of hours watching Three's Company, there, the picture in the bottom, which, you know, did not always present accurate or realistic information when it came to relationships and sex. Maybe you learned from shows like Saved by the Bell or the original Beverly Hills 90210, which sometimes did a good job and probably a lot of times didn't.
Judy Blume was a great sex educator of the past. I think a lot of us learned from her great novels. And things like 17 magazine, I can remember learning and kind of like is how I took it as a teenager and recognizing like, maybe I'm not normal. So a lot of times the media can be quite the sex educator, even if we don't realize that's where our information is coming from. They tend to talk about sex a lot more than our mom and dad.
So you might be wondering why Tori and I are so passionate about sex education. And for those of you who know us, you're aware of this, but a lot of you don't know us personally. We actually have been best friends since we were pretty much born, and we grew up together, had pretty different childhoods. But interestingly, as adults, both became passionate about working with parents and tweens on sex education. So you may wonder, where did that shared passion come from? Because it is a little bit unusual.
Yeah, and Marlena, I don't know if you can hear it, but your audio cuts out every time you start talking.
Yeah, your audio is also cutting out.
So it's just like our Wi-Fi, huh? Well,
Yeah.
we'll keep going then, since I sound clear to me. Maybe we don't know what it sounds like to viewers. Maybe you can chat in and tell us. But we'll keep going, and if there's anything we can think of to tweak it, we will. A little bit about when my experience of growing up with Marlena. So I was raised Catholic, which for some reason means like zero sex education. Like we just do not talk about stuff, and I don't know why that is, but that seems to be pretty common. But our parents were friends. My mom and her mom were friends. And so Marlena's mom told my mom, well, you should tell Tori, and you should tell her everything. You should tell when you're young, when she's young, and you and your husband should both be there. And so my mom, I give her credit. She tried her very best. She went to the church library and she checked out a film about how babies are made, I guess. And what I learned, I remember, is that I got to stay up late with my sister. My brother had to go to bed, and that was very exciting. But what I learned from that experience wasn't so much the facts that I needed to learn, but it was how uncomfortable my parents were with the subject. So my mom was, now girls, if you ever have any questions, you can always come to me. And she said the right words, but she was obviously so uncomfortable that I learned I never wanted to bring up that subject again, because I never wanted to see my parents act this way. My dad's like, maybe I'll learn something, ha ha ha, like just so uncomfortable. So what this taught me was that even when you like do the right things and say the right words, what comes through much more clearly to kids is whether this is a topic that is on limits or off limits, whether this is a topic that kids are open and open to talking about. So Marlene had a very different experience growing up.
Yeah, here Tori and I are cozied up in that chair. My mom still has that chair, by the way. I don't know if we could still fit in it side by side like that, but we spent a lot of hours cozied up watching all sorts of things on TV. One of our favorites actually was Dr. Ruth, if any of you remember her. But I really got a different message in my home, especially from my mom. She had also grown up in a pretty conservative family as Tori was growing up. And so she was not able to talk to her parents about sex and puberty and all of that. And so she really set a goal for herself to be open with my sister and me when it came to all of these topics. And she definitely lived up to that. I felt comfortable asking her pretty much anything. And I was a kid who had a lot of questions. Some kids, you may have one at home that is very tight-lipped around these topics, and you may have another or a child who is very open with these. And those are both really normal, but I was very open and I asked my mom a lot of questions, and I loved the fact that I knew she would give me accurate information and was a knowledgeable source.
Yeah, so it was interesting to have both experience where like nothing is okay to talk about at one house, but then anything is okay at the other. I mean, anything and everything, and like, so watch Dr. Ruth and look at Playboy magazines. Like there was no holds barred. So it was so interesting to kind of get the two contrasting messages from our homes. So where do you think today's kids are getting their sex education? Their primary sex educator is really popular today. So do you think they're getting it from books? I see some comments coming it sounds like it's a big one. Friends, still popular. YouTube videos certainly wasn't something that was around when I was a kid, and that is a source of lots of information.
Yeah, the internet, as we know, has information on everything and anything, which is a valuable resource a lot of the time. However, when it comes to young people learning about sex and relationships and getting information on these topics, the internet can be pretty dangerous because sometimes their first introduction into sex might be explicit pornography or pretty racy photos or videos or images. And so oftentimes it's not their best primary source. And I could tell you, when I was a kid, Google would have been my best friend when it came to these topics. I would have loved having access to all of that information, but it definitely would have not been good for me to have free range with that.
Yeah, so YouTube is certainly a news source. And what we're finding is that when, it's not just boys, but certainly boys are probably more likely for this, when they find something on YouTube that's racy or dating, they tend to share it. That's kind of how boys get introduced to some inappropriate messaging or online pornography, is that they will find some great video and they want to share it with their friends and giggle and laugh together. And so this is really changing the landscape for kids today.
They're also getting information from TV shows, just like I did when I was growing up. The difference is that oftentimes these shows are a lot more explicit than the shows that were on TV when we were their age. They also, we didn't have reality TV when we were growing up, and reality TV, for whatever reason, almost loves to shock with the amount of personal information that they share. And so kids are being exposed to these ideas and topics in really an unfiltered way, which, as a parent myself of two daughters, I know that this is not how I would want them to initially learn about a lot of different things, but in a lot of cases they are.
Yeah. Education, of course. Sometimes it's sharing exciting and interesting things online. And some is that sometimes kids and teenagers will build intimate relationships over the internet. So that they're being their authentic selves or being more emotionally intimate with people they can meet online. Where if that person was in the same room, there would be a lot more of the kind of normal instincts that you might pick up from them, whether they're, and so they don't really know who they're talking to, is obviously a fear of parents, but also that just a strange new phenomenon. Watch Catfish on MTV if you want to get a glimpse as to how people are built online.
So today's kids definitely are getting a sex education. It just might not be the one that you would choose. I hear this a lot from parents when they first start some of our programs, that they're pretty sure their kids don't know very much when it comes to sex. And usually just as soon as we get into the content of the class, they are sort of surprised at how much their kids actually have been exposed to, even if they've been pretty sheltered.
Yeah, they're getting lots of sex education is out there. So we wanted to talk about some of the myths that parents believe, because they're common. You might not even think about it as a myth. So we're going to go into those real quickly.
So the first myth is we have already had the talk. Whew, I'm glad that's done. And there is some irony in the name of our business, Time for the Talk, because the reality is we don't believe that it should be a single conversation that you have with your child. It would be great if we could talk once and they would learn everything they needed to know and be all set and ready to go. But that's just not the reality. For one thing, what they want information on and the questions that they have definitely change as they get older. So it's ideal if we can set it up with our kids where we just have an open running dialogue with them on all issues around sex, puberty, growing up, becoming teenagers and young adults.
Yeah. And myth number 2 is my child doesn't want to talk to me about this. Either one, I think, is a myth. And yeah, some kids are just naturally more closed off, but often this is a topic that is uncomfortable for them. Or I noticed it with my daughter people, and so because it clearly wasn't from me, but she was like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, stop! Ew, gross!" And everything changed one time when I accidentally left one of my little sex ed books in the car, and she had a bunch of her girlfriends in there, and she realized that, hey, nobody else has these books in their car. Everyone wanted to ride it with her and carpool with her. Suddenly she realized this was kind of a hot commodity, and it turned the corner for her, and now she's recognizes it's okay. But it is a myth that parents think, well, because my child doesn't want to talk about it, I shouldn't talk about it.
The third myth is that my child will learn what's needed at school. There are a few schools out there that do a really great job with comprehensive sex education, but the reality is the majority of them don't. Oftentimes, they are really limited on what they can and can't say to students. And the reality is oftentimes they don't have the funding to provide a quality sex education. So you want to make sure that you're playing an active role in their sex education and not relying on the school to do it.
Yeah, or the teachers are uncomfortable with it or whatever, right? So number 4 is I already taught my child to just say no. Oh, if only this were so, if only this worked, right? What we know from the research over many, many decades is that abstinence-only education doesn't work. It's just ineffective. It would be nice if we could say, just say no and kids would obey. But it just doesn't work that way. So really giving education to kids and helping them understand kind of how the world works in the big picture is much more effective.
And number 5, if I explain too much, my child will try it. I've heard this one a lot too from parents, that they're worried if they talk to their son or daughter about sex and birth control and people having sex before they're married and the risks of that, that it's sort of like a free-for-all for their kids to then go ahead and try it. The reality is that our programs are geared towards the preteen, and pretty much across the board, they're pretty grossed out when they learn about sexual intercourse. It's not something that when they hear it described, they're like, yes, I can't wait to try that. And that's because it's something that is for adults. But from my experience, what I hear the most is, I think I'm adopting after they learn about it. So you don't need to worry that your child's going to want to try it if you talk to them about it.
It just doesn't seem to work that way. So how are you feeling? Are you feeling overwhelmed at all? Maybe like there's too much to do and you're not sure where to start. Wondering how you're going to make time for this. Well, stay tuned. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. We are going to walk you through it step by step and talk to you about a program that we've created that does all the hard work for you. Are you ready for a program? Oh, look, that does all the hard work for you. Look, it's like I knew what was coming. So, are you interested in that? Would you like to kind of have the open relationship with your kid, but not need to kind of figure it all out yourself? And we have created something that we want you to stay tuned and listen to.
That's right. We have a 5-week online program called Time for the Talk. And it's really one of a kind because it's a sex education program that you complete with your son or daughter so that you're learning together, you're discussing together. It's very easy to use. I've completed it with my daughter. And basically how it works is you receive 5 emails that have a video that you watch together. And it's an interactive video, so you pause them along the way and talk about different things and do different activities together. And it basically covers comprehensive sex education, what your child needs to know as they become teenagers. And it helps you get comfortable talking with them and them get comfortable talking with you to ideally keep those lines of communication open as your child enters the often tumultuous teen years.
Yes, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So some of the things our program covers that's also important for any kind of sex education program. So if you're going to start opening on the lines of communication with your kids, you want to start with accurate information, making sure that you're being honest and telling them the real names of body parts, or that how babies are actually made, even if it's uncomfortable. We don't want to talk to about storks or other weird myths. So accurate information is very important.
You also want to establish a healthy attitude around sex and growing up, even though it's really common for us to not want to address the fact that our children are sexual beings and will grow up into most likely sexually active adults. It's important to establish this healthy attitude around sex and the changes they're going to go through, and to let them realize that you are comfortable with them coming to you to talk about these things, so that they don't quickly pick up on the message that you're not and go somewhere else for their information.
Yeah, and even if you're embarrassed, to just like admit, like, well, this is really embarrassing for me because my parents didn't talk to me about this, but it's important. So I'm gonna, tolerate my embarrassment and tell you anyways. Being honest and authentic is so much better than, kind of teasing and other coping mechanisms that parents can come up with. So number 3 is respecting our bodies as they are. So when you teach a sex education class, this is what it does. You talk about how our bodies are meant for procreation, right? We're wired to make more human beings, and that all the parts of our bodies are functioning exactly as they're meant to, and everything is it's when you talk about the facts and the purpose for having all these body parts, some of them seen, some unseen, that are tucked inside, but it helps kids to establish a feeling of respect for their bodies, instead of focusing on what's about the way I look and that external judgment, which gets so yucky during the teen years. You're really starting from the inside and saying, hey, I have everything I need to like make babies someday, and isn't it cool how it all functions and works together just as it's meant to.
A quality sex education program also gives you the opportunity to share your values with your sons or daughters. We are growing up in a society where most of us have different values from our neighbors or the people that we're going to school with. They may not be identical like they were oftentimes in the past. So it's really important to make sure you find the time to talk about what you believe is important as they grow up, and to take the time to really discuss what a value is and the importance of being aware of them, because they can help them make good choices for themselves as they grow up as well, if they're really clear on their values.
And kids want to know what our values are. So number 5 is open communication. Of course, we want our kids to feel like they can come to us with anything, whether it's uncomfortable or embarrassing, or it makes us feel uncomfortable, that they can still talk to us about that. So that's what we're really modeling for them, is that even though this is uncomfortable, I'm still going to talk about it.
And you also want to build trust with your child, so they know they can come to you, even if it's something awkward or they're scared to bring up, that mutual trust is there, and that you're not going to go and share whatever they ask you with your friends and post about it on Facebook or things like that, that what they share with you is private and confidential, and that they can trust you.
Yeah. That window of opportunity of when to kind of talk to kids about, or have the talk, as we call it, right? Like to tell them the whole shebang about how babies are made. And it's really between 9 to 12 years old. So what happens is that the door literally closes, like their bedroom door, you'll notice, starts being closed more often. They start locking their bedroom door. They start going to the bathroom and hanging out in there longer behind closed doors. So I think it's funny that this kind of figurative window is actually a literal window too. Sometimes you'll notice on our previous slide, it said 9 to 13. So sometimes when your child they are exposed to a lot. Obviously, kids develop at different rates and their maturity levels. So if you feel like your 13-year-old is still very innocent and maybe it's just starting puberty, then this class will work for them. But sometimes at 13, that door has shut and they're not as open to talking to us about these topics. I also want to explain the facts, the anatomy, physiology. Those are really important things. We're just talking about the birds and the bees, or how babies are made, and our class certainly will go into those, as well as parents. If you're going to do this at home on your own, you want to make sure you're explaining the facts about how babies are made.
Another reason it's important to start this program when our kids really are on the younger side as far as puberty goes is that puberty is starting earlier and earlier. I've seen that with both my daughters where they have classmates and things who are starting to develop breasts or other changes with puberty as young as 8 or 9 years old. And we want to make sure our kids are prepared for what's happening to them, that they understand what's going on. They know what menstruation is. And we also believe it's important for them to know about their own changes as well as the changes of the opposite sex, because it helps them develop a compassion for what all of their classmates are going through and an understanding of what these changes involve, both physically and emotionally and socially.
Yeah. The other reason it's really important to talk how babies are made and what sexual intercourse is between the ages of 9 to 12 is because they're going to hear about it soon from their friends. So what we hope is that when a kid hears, friends talking on the playground, or they're at 5th grade science camp or whatever, and the topic comes up, that they will say to you, because my parents already talked to me about this, and I took a class, and I don't have to listen to these kids out on the playground to learn about sex education, because I already got the information from home. And so they have it presented in a much more respectful way from parents than they do from friends. And often with friends comes inaccurate information.
Also, oftentimes they know a lot, but they need context to what it is that they have learned. So to be able to talk about things like sexual intercourse in the context of a healthy relationship, marriage, whatever your value system is with that, can be really helpful, because oftentimes they're seeing sex in very casual situations on TV and in the movies and sung about in music. And so it can be helpful to talk about these topics in a realistic setting and context for what they will someday experience, as opposed to what they're seeing in the media.
Yeah, like love and intimacy instead of the way their friends might talk about it. So why is it more important with today's kids? Well, really, it's because they're getting so much. We live in this information age where they can Google anything, ask Siri anything, and they can get to their question. But with sex education, it's just that's one topic that we don't want them to Google. As parents, we really want them to learn about it in a way that is respectful and special and infused with, some love and higher, stronger values than Siri might provide for us or Google might provide.
So I want you to think about whether or not you have the same values as your parents, your brothers and sisters, your neighbors when it comes to sex education. My guess is that you probably don't have identical values, which is another reason why it is so important to take the time to talk to our kids about these topics.
Yeah, it's our privilege too, right? We get to talk to our kids about our values and pass them on, and it's great.
Well, you and I certainly think so.
It's like, you want your kids to have your values, and kids want to know it too. So we don't teach values in our sex education program, but we do open up the conversation for parents and kids to talk about what their values are and how they can use them to make good decisions. So our solution is this Time for the Talks education program, sex education program for 9 to 12-year-olds and daughters, and for you to take together. So in this class, we cover all the facts and necessary information. We create a relaxed, easygoing environment. I mean, there's nothing like cuddling up with your son or daughter in their bed with your iPad and talking about intimate subjects in an intimate setting. It shows kids that this can be a relaxing, special time and conversation rather than something that's just made fun of on the playground. Communication on important topics. So, for example, I had one student say, now that I can talk to my mom about sex, I can talk to her about anything. Like it's just we're taking the hardest subject for a lot of parents and helping kids see they're open, so it opens the door. So now if you wanted to talk about drinking or drugs or other, bullying stuff that's going on at school, it shows kids like, hey, my parents can handle talking about sex. They can handle all that other stuff too.
Our number one goal is to help parents keep the lines of communication open. And I really can't stress this enough. They're not going to remember all of the details from any sex education class that they complete. But when you sit down with them and set aside this time, I know how busy we all are. It is a lot to juggle being a parent today. And it's not that often that we sit down and spend that one-on-one, uninterrupted time with our kids. And it is special. To me, it is just priceless. The time that I've made to do this with my daughters, I hear things that I wouldn't hear otherwise. They share stories I wouldn't hear otherwise. And it helps us keep just those lines open so that they know I will make time for them and I will talk with them without judgment and all of those things when they're dealing with tough stuff, which I'm sure if you think back to your teen years, we all remember. It's not an easy time.
Right. So our time for the talk, $149. Such a bargain for this whole class, which includes 5 weekly videos delivered straight to your inbox. So you can order it now. Like right now, you can jump on timeforthetalk.com and order it now. But watch it at any time. So it's totally convenient for you. Whenever's a good time for you and your son or daughter to watch it together, it's there in your inbox and ready to go. Include some PDFs that are activities for you to do with your child that help to open up communication and keep it fun. We don't want this class to be like a lecture style like in school. This is interactive. We want to keep them having, things to do and to talk about and turn to your mom and ask her this and things that keep it interactive. This class offers you ongoing conversations with your child to show them you are the one they can turn to with questions and concerns later on. Your kid is in sperm, but he will remember who sat next to him when he learned it and how he felt. And that's the important part. You also get access to us on our Facebook page or email if you have any questions throughout the class or any uncertainties. Should my husband and I both do it together? Should I have both my kids in the room or all my kids? Just all those little questions like that. Feel free to email us, ask us questions anytime.
You'll also get 5 bonus videos that share with you the most common questions we get in our in-person classes on these nights. And oftentimes kids just love to hear what other kids ask about when it comes to these topics. So they won't miss out on that experience through the online version. And I wanted to say also that if you're listening to this, you think,
oops, sorry, the audio cut out and I couldn't tell. You'll also get a free audio class to help parents answer the tough questions. So sometimes, kids don't ask us like, where did I come from? They ask us like, what's a lap dance? Things you're just like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to answer this one? Or it's so loaded. I heard that, some moms kill their babies when they're still inside their stomachs. When you get a really heavy duty question like that, there's a way that we figured out works best so that it maintains the goal of opening communication with your kid. Because the first thing we want to do is like, where'd you hear that? Don't say that or something like that. And so those are things that close down communication. So we have an audio recording that parents can listen to help them answer those difficult questions.
So you can buy our 5-week class right now for only $149. And you are going to want to take advantage of this special within the next couple of days because we are going to be closing the class down in just a matter of days. So be sure if you're interested that
4 days after this webinar, it will be closed. So you have only 4 days from now to purchase this class, and we're going to be closing. So yes, if you're interested, if this sounds like a thing to do, then you want to go to timeforthetalk.com and buy it now. And like I said, you can watch it at any time. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the details of the class and what it includes so that you'll know exactly what it is that you're getting. So with reproductive anatomy and physiology, we go over male and female body parts, why it feels weird to talk about private stuff. Kids are always, we like to kind of meet them where they are, and they're like kind of awkward and weird sometimes. Sometimes they're curious and interested. But why we talk about public means, and about how parents think that you are mature enough to handle this information. So we kind of play up to their ego a little bit, but also we do it to remind them that this isn't information for them to go spread at school, or that maybe your younger brother or sister isn't quite as mature as you are and not as ready to hear this information, and other kids' parents might want to tell them in a different time or a different way. So we kind of pump up their ego a little bit to help them remember that this is a private topic. This is something to share with mom and dad.
Our second class has everything to do with puberty, and this is probably one of our most popular sessions because kids typically are really curious about what is already happening to them or to their friends or will happen to them. So with this class, they learn both about the changes for boys and girls and how actually there's a lot of overlap about what changes they can expect for themselves as well as the opposite sex. Our main goal on this night, though, is to make them feel relaxed and not worry about whether or not it's happening when it should happen, whether it's on the early side or the late side of puberty, that they're right where they're supposed to be, and that eventually everybody goes through puberty, because there can be a lot of anxiety around when is it going to happen? Why is it not happening to me? And there's just a really wide range of what's normal with puberty, where with a lot of other developmental milestones, it's a much smaller window in which it happens. So this can be anxiety provoking for kids. So we like to reassure them that whatever their body is doing, it is exactly what it should be doing at this moment.
Class 3 is all about understanding conception, pregnancy, childbirth. We do show a very quick and easy childbirth video that doesn't really show much, but it's a great one. And we talk a little bit about birth control, but more in the context of thinking about how most families we know don't have 12 to 20 children, and how most adults choose how many kids they're going to have and when they're going to have them, and that this is just something that they're going to kind of logically start to deduce anyway. So that's the context in which we introduce birth control.
We also talk about the media influences that affect how lots of young people view pregnancy and sex, and we teach them that the reality is that most teenagers actually aren't having sex. Some are, but they certainly are not all, even though the media would like us to think that that's not true. And also the importance of really thinking about what kind of future they want and setting goals for themselves. Research has found that that's actually the #1 way to prevent teen pregnancy, is when teenagers have really clear goals for themselves. And so we give them an opportunity to think about those things.
Class 4, we talk about peer pressure and understanding what peer pressure is and how to cope with it. And we do this by doing some role-playing situations. So it's age-appropriate, but it gives them the practice and so the parents and kids will kind of role-play together to like help them kind of think on their feet, or like, what do I say, and how can I values to help me make good decisions.
We also give them time to think about their values. We mentioned earlier the importance of sharing your values with them, but it's also really important for them to think about what they value in life. We have an activity where they get to actually rank their values and then use those important values to help them make good decisions. And with this activity, it's really fun because we tell the parents that they can't help their child rank their values, that the students get to figure that part out for themselves. And I remember watching this with my daughters thinking, no, you value, being honest much higher than that, or whatever it is. But it can be important to think about what really is the most important to us, and how if you're hanging out with people who have very different values from you, they're probably going to be making different choices than you would want to make, and how that can be really tricky. So we discuss that as well.
Yeah, It's always enlightening when you see your child's thing that telling the truth is their last, most the thing that's least important to them. But I know making them laugh, people laugh is the top. Like, oh, that explains a lot. That's actually very enlightening and helpful. Class 5 talks about understanding healthy relationships. Not that these kids are going to be in an intimate relationship anytime soon, but between 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, friends are starting to be in, kind of like, oh, who likes who, and are you going together, and holding hands, and all this kind of stuff. So we just talk about how a healthy relationship has 3 components. It has the physical contact, but it also has an emotional connection and a level of commitment. They need to all go together hand in hand in order for a healthy, balanced relationship. So we kind of talk about, like, if you meet somebody online and you're like, oh, I'm in love with this person I've never met, how that really doesn't lend itself well to, to being a healthy, balanced relationship.
We also give them a chance to set goals for themselves and hopefully keep them on a path that is in line with their values and where they want to end up once they're out of high school and entering into young adulthood. And they have a lot of fun with us, thinking about all of their possibilities.
Indeed. We try to keep it fun for them, right? And so it's just kind of this idea that adolescence doesn't have to be hard. I mean, I think a lot of us fear the teen years and we're like, oh my God, it's going to be so terrible. But when you have an open, trusting relationship with your kid, it makes all the difference. So they can be in their hormonal and have a hard time. But if you have this trusting relationship where you feel like you can talk to each other, it makes it so much better. But if it does become hard, I offer a free life coaching session to everybody who takes the Time for the Talk class. If there's a time when you're like, okay, this is out of my control, or I notice I'm really uncomfortable with this one subject, then you can just go to lifecoachingforparents.com/work with me and schedule a free life coaching session, and we'll talk it through and help you kind of feeling more like at peace so that you can be the kind of person that connects with their kids. Because there's certain things that repel kids, like whirlwind and kind of clinginess is a bit of a repellent to teenagers. So if you find yourself in a situation, you don't have to stay there. We can talk it out.
And I do have to say, Tori is amazing at what she does as a life coach. She has helped me numerous times and helped keep me sane and make me a better mom. So I can't recommend her enough in that capacity. So this is a quote from Cheryl. She says, I loved hearing my husband and son giggling through the bedroom door as they were completing Time for the Talk. And I think that actually surprises a lot of kids, is how much fun they have with our program. If you are watching this and thinking, I would love to do this, but there's no way in a million years my son or daughter is going to want to take this class, that is so normal. Most kids, when they hear about this, they're not like, oh yeah, that sounds great, mom or dad. But the reality is we've created it in a way that is fun, it's educational, it's respectful. And once they get into the program, they tend to really enjoy it and like having that time with you.
Yeah, and it's okay that it's fun, right? It's not like it has to be super serious. We want it to be a bonding experience, and giggling is a good way to do that. It shows that this kind of parent-child sex education reduce the rate of teen pregnancy, increase the use of birth control, delay first intercourse, and reduce the number of sexual partners. So we didn't just kind of make up a class that was like just what we wanted. This is actually based in research that shows these things that most parents kind of want. Most parents want first sex to be consensual, to be protected, to be safe, and maybe to delay. When polled, most people wish before having sex for the first time. And so I think as parents, we can look at that and say, yeah, delaying first intercourse until they're really ready, using birth control, this sounds like a good idea. So our class is based on the research to back that up.
After completing Time for the Talk, you will have covered the basics of everything your 9 to 12 or 9 to 13-year-old needs to know. You will have learned how to speak the truth around these topics in a relaxed, fun way, even if you feel embarrassed, which is so normal. Most of us don't go around talking about this all the time, with the exception of Tori and me. You will have experienced being a student with your child and learned the same things together. And kids love that. They love that there may be some things you don't know and that you're learning together, and that they maybe even are going to teach you some things when you start talking with them about what they know or don't know, or questions that they have. You will have opened up the lines of communication and created an ongoing dialogue with them. So ideally, they will continue to come to you with their questions. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, their questions and what they want to talk about changes as they get older. And so keeping those communication lines open is really important. And you will have crossed the talk off your list of things to do. We know how busy you are, and to be able to just sit down, go through 5 classes that cover what your child needs to know, and then cross it off your list feels wonderful.
Indeed. We all need that sense of completion, don't we? You can jump over to timeforthetalk.com right now and purchase our class. Like I said, it's only going to be up for a few more days, so make sure that you are taking advantage of this opportunity. You will have demonstrated that making time for intimacy and serious conversation is worthwhile. This is what our class, because someday when your child is much older, we're going to want them to have a serious and intimate conversation with a partner. Like, what kind of birth control should we use? Are we ready for this step? What happens if we break up? Whatever. Those are pretty serious and pretty intimate conversation topics. And so what you're demonstrating for them is that it's worth it. It feels, once you do it, it feels kind of nice. You'll be surprised at how much the kids really enjoy this time together with you. And you're showing them it's valuable and it's okay doing. So it's one of those things that is just like a side effect of our program that's so wonderful.
You will have created a tighter bond and show your child that you care. So this is just that idea that taking that time to just listen to them and be with them, it's just invaluable. And every time I make that time, I wish I did it more often. It's just important.
Yeah. So this class will also help your child feel confident that they can handle anything that comes their way, because they know they've got you in their corner, right? You've got their back. And so it makes them kind of, feel like they've got your support, they've got your compassion, you've got information that's helpful to share with them. And it kind of gives them that courage to go out into the big bad world and be an adolescent.
Another former student said this program is brilliant and really so much fun. You will feel empowered and oh so much closer to your kiddo. Run, don't walk, sign up now, Jennifer. And after having literally hundreds of families complete our program, I can say with confidence that I've never heard from somebody who said, oh, that was a waste of our time. I wish we hadn't done that. Usually people respond just as Jennifer has.
That is true. Everyone is very grateful they did it. But if you want to know what kids have to say, we've got a couple of quotes here from kids who've taken the class. Now that I've done the class, it isn't awkward anymore. And probably the #1 comment that most kids say. My favorite thing was being with my mom without my little brother around. So this is the kind of stuff we don't think about, I don't think that kids really actually want, but they really love it. I have had many kids say, I wish it wasn't over. What else you got? Let's keep it going. And I liked learning about peer pressure and how to handle it. This class made me more confident. We have just hundreds of little quotes like this from kids that are just so wonderful, and they really enjoy it. And they, it's like they didn't realize that sometimes being grossed out can be so much fun. So we appreciate you talked with us today. If you're interested in buying our program, go to timeforthetalk.com.
Let your friends know too. We could all use help in this area, and it truly is mine and Tori's passion, helping parents just like you stay close and connected with their kids.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for making time for the talk, and we'll see you next time. Check your email for the link. to our website, or just go straight to timeforthetalk.com. Have a great day.
Still says live.